thanks for joining me for this video where I'm going to tell you the story of Virabhadra. You may have heard this word and know it as Virabhadrasana or the warrior poses, which are so commonly practiced in many yoga asana classes. And I thought it was time that I share the story for that. You can also join me for a 40-minute Virabhadrasana practice, taking you through, I guess, what I get from this story in a physical practice, what I've learned from it and how it allows me to approach my practice, but also the way in which I live in the world. But first, let's start with the story. So, I've lost my page. I'm going to have to find my page. Bear with me one moment. It is here. Virabhadrasana, the warrior poses. So it is important to know that these poses, there's three of them. There's warrior 1, warrior 2, and warrior 3. There's also humble warrior, which I'm not sure if this story mentions it. We'll see. But those three all form part of the story. So, the great Shiva has a fierce and unending love for his consort, Shakti. Shakti has many incarnations, as the gods often do. So Shakti is the feminine, Shiva is the masculine. And in her various forms, she is known by different names. During one of her many lifetimes, she was known as Sati and was born to a mortal father named Daksha. Sati was incredibly beautiful and wholly devoted to Shiva. He was her secret love, and she kept this hidden within the depths of her heart while she was growing up, worshipping him and professing her love to him only in private. Daksha wasn't a huge fan of Shiva. His ideal mate for his daughter didn't include a dreadlocked guy covered in ash who was known to have a bad temper, who sat in meditation for thousands of years on top of a remote mountain. Not to mention his choice of clothing, which was pretty scant. Nonetheless, Sati's heart was set upon Shiva, and she would never be happy unless they could be together. When Sati came of age, her father had a grand party to which he invited every eligible suitor in the land, except, of course, Shiva. Well, being a clever young woman, Sati knew just how to work around her father to get what she wanted. During the party, she mixed and mingled with other partygoers, making her father proud by feigning interest in a few of the young men. However, when the time came to choose her partner, she threw the garland she had been wearing around her neck up in the air and invoked the name of the great Shiva. He then appeared in the sky, donned the garland, and fell to Sati's side with great joy. And according to tradition, whoever wore the garland must be the one to wed the available daughter. So Daksha had no choice but to give his lovely princess to the god he despised so much. Daksha's fury would not go unavenged. After Sati and Shiva were wed and living happily on the mountaintop, Daksha threw yet another grand soiree. And again he made a point not to invite Shiva, which was an insult of the highest order. Sati became very upset that her father still would not accept the choice that made her so happy. During the Jubilee, Sati appeared before her father with a saddened face and sorrow in her heart. All the guests turned to see Daksha's beautiful daughter standing and weeping before him. Daksha, who loved his daughter very much, was distraught to see her so upset, but stood by his decision to continue to reject Shiva as her partner. Sati's fury and great sadness ignited a fire that burned so brightly inside her that she went up in flames right in the middle of the party and was reduced to a pile of ashes before her father's very eyes. Sati's self-immolation caused a great disturbance in the universe, which Shiva felt in his meditative state upon Mount Kailash. He knew instantly that something had happened to his beloved. When the heavenly minstrel Narada came to him with the tale of what had occurred, Shiva became absolutely furious. In his fury and rage, He stood on top of the mountain, ripped a dreadlock from his head and threw it on the ground. With the force of his anger, this dreadlock snaked into the earth and all the way down through the mountain, only to emerge in the centre of the party, right in the very spot where Sati's ashes lay. The dreadlock was transformed into Virabhadra, the great warrior, who rose out of the ground. Think warrior one pose, palms together, face upturned. He drew his sword, his arms opened, think warrior two pose, and sliced off Daksha's head. When it fell to the ground, Virabhadra bent to pick it up and reached forward to place it upon a stake. Think warrior three, arms reaching forward. This shocking act caused quite an uproar among the partygoers, who tried to flee the scene because they feared for their own heads. In the world of the gods, things can happen almost instantaneously. And this dire situation required the great Sati to secure another form very quickly so she could go reason with Shiva. She donned a new body and showed up at the party again, but this time she scolded Shiva for beheading her father. "Look at what you've done," she exclaimed to Virabhadra, knowing that Shiva would hear her on the mountaintop. "I know my father didn't do a kind thing, but it wasn't your place to step into the middle of it and kill him. Do you really think that is going to solve our problem and make him accept you?" Shiva hadn't really thought of that. He was just so angry at Daksha, he didn't really consider how Sati would feel, or that it would start a dramatic chain of events that would eventually make things worse, not better. The problem was, he hadn't thought at all. Sati demanded, "Make this right now. I don't care how you do it, just fix it." Well, Shiva himself arrived at the party, where a few lone party goers were peering from behind the trees to see what the great would do. He came in marching with his trident in hand and realized immediately that Daksha's head was not suitable for reattachment, so he found the nearest replacement, which happened to be a goat. Off the head of the goat went, and onto Daksha's body it landed. Shiva breathed a great exhale and life returned to Daksha's body. The object of his rage was standing in front of him, but Daksha suddenly felt grateful that Shiva had realized his error and had made amends. In his gratitude, and with the realization that he had not behaved in a dignified way towards Shiva, Daksha held one final party and made Shiva and Sati his guests of honor. Often, when I read through these stories, they remind me of the challenges that we can face in the world. And there is no doubt that in our humanness, we are faced with challenges, fights, maybe you might call them, from time to time. We might be faced with people or perspectives that do not agree with our hearts or our love or our way of being. And the thing that I really enjoy about these stories is that they remind us that through it all, the first yama, ahimsa, as Patanjali puts it, is non-harm. And so by adding a lens of non-harm or non-violence, we're actually asking to come at those situations from our heart over our head. And when we might not be thinking at all and just doing, we are not really practicing yoga. So yes, we can do the yoga asana and we can do the practices. And the thing that I love about those is that in the practice, I get so far out of my head and into my body that I can't be thinking with my head and I am led by my heart and my breath. But they also give us an opportunity to pause the thinking mind so that we can see beneath those surface layers of thoughts. And in those pauses that we practice on the mat, we can have a greater chance of pausing in the challenges that we face in the world. And instead of a reactionary answer like what Shiva did here, we can use our heart and see that perhaps there is a better way. There is a way to make things right. And choosing that way is the pathway, what the pathway of yoga is asking us to do. In that, we are decreasing suffering both for ourselves and for those around us. And I believe that to be some of the essence of what yoga is, and also very much what this story is telling us. To fight fire with fire doesn't necessarily make something turn from wrong to right. But what can play a part is pausing, listening to our heart, finding a sense of love and compassion for all, and understanding that everyone's pathways and perspectives and experiences are their own, and we cannot take that away from them or change that for them, but we can pause and make a different choice for us. And that choice can come from the heart, not the head. So I hope that gives you a little bit about the story. And I wanted to add just a little bit more here. So this story goes on to talk about the warrior's code of behavior. And it does have a reference from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras in it. So often in yoga, we are talking about that lighthearted and follow your heart and let your heart expand. And sometimes I think the point is missed a little bit. It's more about what's the essence of your heart saying, what is going to, again, decrease suffering for you and for all in some way. And that ripple effect begins with you. This book says, challenges arise that shake us to our very core, as was the case for Shiva when he was faced with his beloved's death at what he believed to be the hands of her father. The knee-jerk reaction most of us experience is exactly that. It is a reaction. Often our impulses, like Shiva's, lead us to seek revenge. We may not always act on that impulse as Shiva did, but we may secretly want to. And turning such thoughts over in our head is also violence. It is harmful to our psyche, to our bodies, to our minds, and then energetically in the way that we choose our words from the thoughts that we think, and then perhaps the way in which we choose our actions. The truth is, things rarely go as planned. For example, how much time have you spent in your mind playing out an entire argument? We think, okay, if he says this, then I'll respond in this way. Then he'll probably say that, and I'll say this in the end. And in the end, the conversation rarely goes the way that you want it to. We deal with disappointments and failed expectations every single day. And this kind of constant stress can lead an inspiring yogi to wonder, how can we resist the impulse of a heated moment? And as I say in the practice, if you do the practice, often we simply need to discern between the head and the heart. Are we reacting, or are we coming from a place that our highest self, our most loving and compassionate self, would be encouraging us to do or say? And sometimes the answer is not what you think. In the Yoga Sutras, Sutra 133 says, in order to preserve an elevated state of mind, be happy for those who are happy, and cultivate compassion for those who are sad, feel delight for those deemed to be lucky, virtuous, or righteous, and experience indifference to those perceived to be wicked. We need to look deeper than what the mind is telling us. Daksha could have chosen to be happy for his daughter, who was so deeply in love with Shiva, who knew and saw and followed her heart's pathway. and yet he decided not to. Likewise, some of her potential suitors may have had a hard time feeling delighted for her good fortune in landing Shiva because they may have wished for her hand in marriage as well. Behaving with compassion or detachment isn't easy. When Sati came to Daksha in sadness because of his rejection of Shiva, he could not feel compassion for her because he was too caught up in being right. And Shiva, on the other hand, looked upon Daksha's unkindness towards his daughter as wicked. Instead of remaining indifferent, he sought revenge and sent Virabhadra to exact it. Even the gods don't get it right sometimes, although their apparent mistakes are really made to teach us valuable lessons, to remind us. They give hope to the rest of us who try hard every day to maintain a yogic state of mind, or to have some awareness of these different principles and morals and ethics and ways of being that yoga is asking us to have awareness of, consideration of, and maybe even to integrate within the way in which we interact with the world. It's asking us to do this, but it is not commanding us. It is not saying you can't get it wrong, but it is saying maybe sometimes we can do it better. We begin by doing a posture in a certain way, and we continually deepen our experience of the posture in order to further our practice. In the same way that we do that on the mat, we should be doing the same off the mat. And so I hope that this story, for all of its flaws, for all of Shiva's and Daksha's and Sati's flaws, remind you that it's okay to be human and not get it right sometimes, but also to remind you that a decision, a thought, a word or action that is coming genuinely from the essence of your heart is potentially going to create a more profound positive impact on you and those around you than what a decision made from the mind in a reaction is going to. Have a beautiful day or evening wherever you might be in the world listening to this video. Thank you for letting me tell you the story of Virabhadra, or the Virabhadrasana poses, and I hope that you will join me for the 40-minute practice that is also connected with this video.